Salutare tuturor și bine v-am regăsit la Crypto Chestionar. Salut, Andrei!
Salut, George!
Suntem la Chestionarul Crypto Vineri, unde încercăm să vă aducem proiecte interesante care credem noi că ar putea să schimbe și lumea, eventual. Unele vor încerca, altele vor și reuși.
Toate vor încerca.
Noi sperăm să și încerce, pentru că nu putem băga mâna în foc pentru cei pe care vi aducem, dar încercăm să vi prezentăm pentru a vă ajuta să vă faceți fundamentalele, adică cercetarea, adică hashtag DYOR.
Da, și să puneți o față și o voce în spatele proiectelor în care poate vă gândiți să investiți sau pur și simplu vreți să aflați mai multe despre diferite proiecte.
Astăzi, așadar, vrem să vă prezentăm un proiect pe care cu siguranță l-ați văzut sau despre care ați auzit destul de multe, dar poate că nu înțelegeți ce caută el ca al doilea proiect deja pe launchpad-ul celor de la Elrond.
Da, poartă toată presiunea acestui o rânduire, să zicem așa, vine fix după Ride, care a avut un fulminant succes la lansare, așa că are și presiunea asta, dar o să discutăm despre toate lucrurile astea cu fondatorii acestui proiect. Itheum.
Oare cum se numește? Asta este prima întrebare pe care o să avem pentru cei doi fondatori și cofondatori și le spunem bun venit și de aici o să trecem în engleză. I'm going to welcome to this video, to this interview, our guests Praveen and Mark. Hey Mark.
Hi there.
Hey guys.
Hey Praveen.
Hi guys.
I'm going to do a short introduction for both of you. In short, Praveen Paul, the guy you see on the over here, yeah, that's the one. He's the co-founder and COO, the Chief Operating Officer, and the other guy over here, yeah,
Down there, yeah.
down there is Mark Paul, founder and CEO of the project. And coincidence or not, this is actually sort of the way they are positioned, located right now around the world, because these two guys are not in the same place, and we are not sharing the same continent. So no. We are in Europe. Praveen is in Asia, Middle East, and Mark is in Australia, actually.
That's right.
Can you tell us where you are exactly?
Yeah, so right now I'm based in Sydney, Australia. So it's probably the latest for me, and I think you guys, it must be quite early.
It's the middle of the day for us, actually.
And Praveen is actually in Dubai.
That's right. I'm based in Dubai.
Just for a blockchain summit or actually living and working from there?
I'm living and working here.
Okay. And how do you two get along, being C-levels in a project like this, working from two different continents, two different time zones?
Well, I think I actually try to adjust my time zone to where the most of the team is. So I'm usually starting work pretty late, and I work up until late at night in my time. But yeah, we just try to sync up time zones as best as we can.
Very, very short bio on the two of you. Both co-founders of the project have 20 years of experience in technology, blockchain, and AI. Blockchain is not that young, that old. It's let's say it's something from the past few years. But I'd like to have you, let's say, present yourself to our audience and understand where you're coming from. Can you start with Mark?
Sure. Firstly, thanks for having us, guys. We're super excited to be here with you. So my name is Mark Paul. As you guys pointed out, I'm based in Australia at the moment, but I do travel quite regularly between all our countries where the teams are. So I've been in tech for over 20 years. And as you pointed out, blockchain isn't that old, but I've been in traditional Web 2 tech, if you could call it. Started my career in MSN, where I used to work with the Microsoft Messenger and Hotmail teams based here in Australia. But then over that time of 20 years, I've been working for the Australian government and a few other companies. So I've made the big shift into crypto, I think when everybody else did, right? 2017. I loved the tech. I started getting pretty heavily involved in the tech side of things. But Itheum as an idea started about 5 years ago during that time, but materialized probably in the last 1 year. So that's pretty much it from me.
Praveen?
Yeah, sure. So Praveen Paul. So I think one of the things that Mark didn't mention, which is obviously quite important, is we are brothers from the same mother.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah. So certainly, I think that helps a lot. It helps us adjust and work well with each other, despite being in different time zones, different countries. We know each other well, obviously, having grown up together and understood each other's backgrounds very well, right? So I come from a traditional software background too. So pretty much started in Singapore in engineering, sort of worked there, then started my own business in Australia, again in engineering. So we did engineering software for a lot of the actual mining industry, not the crypto mining industry. Everybody, thinks whenever I talk mining, they talk crypto mining, but the actual mining industry, and water treatment, that sort of things, which Australia is very big about. So after that, I transitioned into hospitality software. So pretty much been in different verticals, which are very data intense. And now last year, Mark just wrote me in and said, hey, look, why don't you take a trip to the other side? And, got me into crypto. So very glad to be a part of this journey now.
I like how it sounds. Take a trip to the other side. You took a trip and stayed there. You moved to the other side, actually. How much of your involvement is now in crypto? Are you full crypto now, or are you also advising and working for other companies?
Yeah, pretty much full crypto now. But obviously, I've got other companies too, but they're all set up and they run independent of me.
Okay, and Mark?
Oh, full crypto, man. I'm 110% crypto.
Yeah, so you were the first one that got sucked into it.
Okay.
But, that being said, one thing that's quite different about our project is we're looking at how to bridge data from Web 2 into Web 3. So we do spend a lot of time looking at that as well. So we're involved in a lot of companies in the traditional space and kind of helping them bridge into Web 3.
So that brings us to the purpose of our meeting today. We're going to talk about your project. And how do you spell the name? How do you call yourselves, your project?
Yeah, so the way you pronounce it is Itheum. Itheum. And
Itheum.
It is pronounced in different ways around the world. We've noticed some people pronounce it really well, even better than us. But the way you pronounce it is Itheum.
Okay, so do you mind if we call it Itheum? In Romanian, it's much easier. Itheum is like, okay.
But where does it come from? What does it mean?
What's the origin of the name?
Yeah, great question. So this is one question we get asked quite a lot because, as you might have noticed, it sounds very familiar to another blockchain company. So I wouldn't mention which one, but I think you all know. So the idea of the name was, so Itheum as an idea, like I said, started many years ago. And it started in the health industry. And the first product that we actually released was a cardiovascular monitoring platform, a data platform. And Itheum in my native and mine and Praveen's native language of Tamil means heart, Itheum. So that's the origin of the name.
That's nice. That's unexpected, at least to say. I was thinking something from IT and Itheum, maybe the final part of Ethereum or something like that.
Interesting.
Yeah,
heart and soul. We're going to talk about a lot about heart and soul today, from what I've been reading about you guys.
Yeah. So let's get it on. Can we have a pitch about Itheum? How does it work? What does it want to achieve in the future? And where is it right now?
So I'm going to make it easy for you. You just you're in front of Satoshi Nakamoto or Vitalik Buterin, and you need to convince them about the viability of your project. How do you sell it to them in 30 seconds or a minute?
It's certainly not making it easy sitting in front of those two people, but let me give it a go. So the way we summarize it in one sentence is Itheum lets you own and trade your data in the metaverse. Now, that's a very abstract sentence, but it actually gets your mind thinking about different concepts, right? Like, what is the metaverse and why should I own and trade my data within the metaverse? So that's the one sentence. And I think what connects everybody around the world to our project is the fact that they all know that they own very valuable personal data. And we are really pitching this idea of a new world where they are the owners of their data, especially when we move into the metaverse ecosystem.
We don't actually own our own data, aren't we? Because we've been talking a lot about data ownership. We have these huge companies that store a lot of data, and I could start rambling for the next half hour how they abuse the data points that they gather on us. But in your experience, how much data is actually harvested from the users?
Yeah, I mean, we've watched a few of your interviews, and I think we did pick that up, right? Like this topic of what's happening in the real world, right? Like we are tricked into believing that we are using apps and services for free. But the way we always say it is you're not using it for free, you're paying for it with your data. This industry of data being taken from people, this is like a mainstream industry. There's a name to this. It's called the data brokerage industry. There are first-party data brokers and third-party data brokers, and they're operating in a $200 billion industry. So it's quite huge. It's very secretive. They don't want you to know about it, obviously. But yeah, it's a huge industry.
Some of that does leak. So when we find out that Google has been paying to be the only search engine on the iPhone, so that's a way of doing business, isn't it?
That's correct. Yeah, and you'll see this on certain occasions when they actually get caught out using your data in ways that you never agreed to or you never even imagined they would, right? But I think that's what's happening right now. People are starting to understand that there's something else going on. Why are things so accurate? How do these softwares know so much things about me and my family? So people are starting to kind of understand that. But you're right, it's a huge problem.
So we actually know from the Cambridge Analytica incident that Facebook doesn't need all that much data to create a personal profile. So they were talking about at least the minimum was 8 data points. How many data points do you know are being gathered about an individual nowadays? And how much do they actually need to have a persona to trade?
Yeah, awesome question. So I think that's one thing we keep talking about. We have a slide deck, and that's actually the first part of our slide deck. So we say that there is this concept of third-party data brokers who are a bit more nefarious. Okay. It's estimated they have around 3,000 data points on each one of us, which is Which is scary to think about what they own, right? And a lot of that.
I don't know 3,000 things about myself or my wife.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's if you look at what they do is they effectively they collect longitudinal data, right? Effectively, how a certain metric over time, and this is actually more valuable to them because they kind of see how you're evolving, how your behavior is evolving. How your preferences are evolving. So I think it's pretty insane to think that they've been doing this for such a long time. You guys will be interested to know that the third-party data brokerage market actually predates the internet because this has been happening even before. Okay.
Wow, amazing.
Okay, that sounds really interesting. But the whole point of Itheum is getting power back to the people. Getting the power from those big companies that use and sell your data to actually allowing the individual to sell the data. How much can someone's data value on the open market? Yeah,
so I think the first thing we always try to kind of highlight is that it's not like trying to get rid of the big tech companies, right? Because can you imagine a world without the level of personalization we have? Like how it'll be so much harder to look for things, to find your friends.
Of course.
So I think what we're trying to do is introduce technology that kind of balances this equation. So you might be able to trade your data or at least pick who you want to trade your data, right? So the estimates for how much data is worth, like it can range from, if it's just your data, like if you just look at one single thing, like your email is supposed to be worth $89 according to the market metrics. But if you look at your personal data set at a high level, your demographic data and stuff, it's around $240 a year. It's not a lot when you think about an individual data set. But when you start getting more complex data, like your DNA or your phenotypic data, which describes your sort of traits, this we're looking at, $5,000 to $7,000. But again, We're not even gone into to how much more this becomes valuable when you group it with people like you. Because then bulk data set, right?
Interesting. I was just looking at the valuation of Meta, the company today, and it exceeds 600 billion. So if you divide that by 2 billion friends, so that's roughly $300 for every not paying user, let's say. So you're not paying to use the service, but you're becoming the product. We already know that. So once we established this idea ownership of data and value of data, most people start thinking, okay, but what can I actually do? Because I cannot go to Apple and say, I no longer want to have my data harvested by you, because they're harvesting through the search engine, but also through iMessage. And Google is harvesting through their entire ecosystem. And then every other company that sells a hardware product, or let's say something connected, they are trying to harvest that data, which brings, let's say, more money on the third, let's say, the third market, on the gray market of private data. So what can we actually do? And this is where you come in. What's your, let's say, proposition for the community?
Sure. So I think the first thing to call out is, we're not the first ones who have tried to do this, right? There are plenty of other blockchain companies who are aiming or building products to monetize data through data marketplaces and all of that. The way we kind of look at ourselves differentiate ourselves is we look at how do we build products that would end up becoming viral and enable what we call bottom-up adoption. If you look at the other platforms operating this space, a lot of them move from a top-down adoption, right? So they're trying to incentivize enterprises to use this tech and somehow get that tech pushed down. We really don't think that's going to happen. Like, why would an enterprise adopt this? Because it's in a direct sort of conflict with their business models. And we've learned that the hard way, right? So we've been trying to do this for so many years, and we were looking at the bottom-up adoption. So what we're doing right now is saying, okay, how could we come up with a set of retail products? And we can go into these products in detail. That would make somebody like you and me, or just even an average person, an average gamer, or just an average person anywhere in the world, want to participate in this, right? And it's through, we'll dive into this, it's through a concept of data avatars. So that's how we kind of differ. If we could attract a large enough base of people from the bottom up, that creates the data pool that the top can't ignore. And that's the way we look at it.
So instead of going to the big companies and telling them, look, you might want to use this more transparent and fair system to harvest data, they're not going to do it. They're just going to want to keep the status quo. And then you go to the average Joe and tell him, look, there's an opportunity. Let's try and do that.
Yeah, in fact, we're actually doing, our focus is bottom up. What we have, and that's one of Praveen's main roles, is we also have a product called the Data Cat, which is incentivizing people at the top. When I say the people at the top, we're talking about businesses to also try to participate in this. So we are almost attacking this problem from both directions.
Yeah, so I could probably share a bit more about that, because I look after probably a bit more the enterprise angle, coming from an enterprise background, right? So obviously we've got the bottom-up approach, which ultimately the core is obviously you and I, who are actually owning and claiming ownership of our data sets, right? And then being able to align ourselves to an entity who will either trade that on our behalf or do it directly. So when we look at organizations, right, organizations can also align themselves with our actual product, through means of what Mark was explaining, the Data Cat, right, which is essentially a platform which enables Web 2 companies, Web 2 organizations to start feeding data into our platform, right? And I think this is a big thing, because not a lot of Web 2 companies actually have the ability to understand crypto or figure out how that whole industry works and how that ownership, how everything happens there, because it's a bit complex, right? So we're sort of handling it at that level by providing some sort of an adapter through our Data Cat. So Web 2 companies can also start pushing data into our platform and utilize our platform on the back end to basically give ownership to their participants and basically trade the data. So it's a two-pronged approach, like, both that everyday Joe as well as obviously dealing with sort of enterprise Web 2 clients as well.
So let's try and get more specific and bring it back to the basics. So let's say imagine a fitness company launching a new, let's say, fitness tracker that also monitors biometrics and sleep data. How can that company do it the right way using the Data Cat?
Yeah, I can dive into that. So think of the Data Cat as an SDK, a software development kit, which has a few hooks into it. And one of those hooks is called the data adapter. And it's an automated way the user, who in this case the user is the central part, they go and they delegate the link between all of the variables that they use, the apps that they use, and the data adapter is automatically sucking the data in and linking it in a decentralized way to the user. When I say linking it, it's effectively bridging that data into Web3 and abstracting the sort of the encryption and stuff in a way that it's linked directly to the user. So it's still, so that's one way. And the second way is we're actually targeting like small to medium businesses in the Web2 world. And we provide them this SDK that makes it easy for them to build structured data collection tools. So effectively what we're saying is, just build your entire app on our SDK, and the whole pipeline of data flows from Web 2 all the way to Web 3 and into a very engaged user that you might have.
Yeah, I mean, just to add a few points to that as well. I mean, just imagine yourself. You just said you know it's a fitness-related data, right? Now, if you were to put yourself in a situation where you were told by the company that, hey, we are going to use your data, but we're going to give you something for it, right? You would be a lot more willing to share data, and that to more data, because you're benefiting from it, right? So that's the purpose behind this, having that ethos as a company to tell people, hey, look, we're taking some data from you that you're willing to give us, but we're giving you something in return. And when you do get something in return, you're always willing to share more, right? So that's the whole thinking behind onboarding these enterprises, also these Web2 companies sort of coming into the platform.
So that also might create a, let's say, a rebound effect where people might say, okay, but if you're not giving me anything for my data, I might not want to share anymore. So we might see a new kind of companies or a shift in the existing companies to start acknowledging that they are harvesting and giving something back for that data they're harvesting from their users.
Exactly right. Yeah, that's spot on, right? Like it creates pressure to companies that are actually harvesting data without your knowledge to start incentivizing users to provide data, right? So you're absolutely right. It does create a different way of thinking, right? Because a lot of organizations, if they start thinking that way, then it becomes a common trend and everyone aligns to it.
Yeah, but there's a saying about the necessary quantity that you need. You need critical mass to achieve that goal. So I'm not so sure we're close to that moment, but anytime soon. Before that, let's see, we understand how the data harvesting goes, and we understand that everybody is involved in this, also the person that's providing, inputting the data. But what do we do with the data once it goes into that pool of data? What happens with all the data you're harvesting?
Sure. So we'll use a real world example, right? So we have an app in the Web2 world called OK Pulse. So this was actually not built by us. It was built by a third party, and we co-designed it with them. So they are a corporate wellness company. So they are looking at employee wellness, right? Like how engaged is my employee base. So they built their complete platform on the Itheum data cat. The difference here is that when they built it, they acknowledged that they will never be able to identify a user, but they will be able to view cohort analysis. And if you think of a company, what the company is trying to do is they're trying to look at trends among the employees, right? In a team or in a department. But what we found when we rolled this out with a value proposition that the employee is the one who owns the data, and the employee can go into our data decks, which is our second product. We will dive into that. And they can literally claim ownership of all the data that's coming from the OK Pulse app. And the next step to that is they align it to what we call a data coalition DAO. And the data coalition DAO is literally buying data from all of these apps that are employee wellness space. So the way we say this is, listen, if we want to move data from Web 2 to Web 3 and create an ecosystem or a marketplace around it, we can't just move all data. Like as an example, you can't pipe in all your wellness data because it's just too much of data. What we want to do is create this app layer in Web 2 that onboards data and creates like structured outcome-oriented data. And then you bridge those data sets into Web 3, let the user own it, align with the data coalition DAO, and then bulk trade it. So this is the entire pipeline that we're building.
Okay.
Okay, so getting back to the previous question, we have the set of data. We have maybe individual data or maybe bulk data. Where do we go with it? You said something about the data decks.
Yeah. So effectively, we have three groups of products, right? So we have the data cat, which Praveen explained. If I think of that as the bridge of outcome-oriented structured personal data from Web 2 to Web 3. Then we got the middle layer, which is our data decks. Think of this as the place where you can claim ownership of your data. It provides a mechanism for you to discover data and claim ownership. And the third layer is, I think we should really dive into that, but that's what we call the data metaverse, right? And that layer is around the viral retail adoption that I was talking about. How do we get people to do things in Web3 that is fun and addictive, but at the same time, teaching them about data ownership, about claiming ownership of data, right? So do you guys want to jump into the actual data metaverse feature set, or maybe we'll try to drill into the data decks feature set a bit more?
Let's go a little bit into data decks, which is maybe the first part and the most closest to the present time, and then we will dive also in the metaverse.
Sure. So the data decks is already deployed to many testnets. So what it does is effectively a mechanism for you to log in with decentralized ID, discover data sets, and link it to your identity, and then do things like convert them into NFTs, convert into data NFTs, discover data sets from other people, and engage in peer-to-peer data trade. Think of this as sort of like the building blocks that are Web3 for data. And they all work together to kind of enable this sort of ecosystem of peer-to-peer trade and also bulk trade.
Okay. So I can go in and join one of the DAOs, or I can buy data if I need it for a product or service I'm working on.
Or sell your own data, like you could sell your Facebook data, because Facebook allows you to download actually some data they harvest about you, or maybe any arbitrary data set, which is interesting. Actually, we had, probably you saw that we have a discussion with Bruce Pond from Ocean Protocol like a few months ago, which is maybe similar to your project, but has this distinct thing where they don't have actually the best part, I think, in your project, that the NFMe, the soulbound NFT, which is actually the gatherer, right? It's your own avatar that lets you gather your own resources. I actually asked him by that time that if he has any idea about an extension or something that could help you harvest your own data, but he said he's not looking really into that, and seeing that your project is actually doing that had me impressed. Can you talk a little bit more about how that works?
Yeah. In fact, that's kind of what we pretty much solely focus on, right? Like going back to the concept of what would it make an average person excited about this, right? If we present them a really complex looking data marketplace where they can go and upload like a file, it's just too complex, right? Like, and especially if you look at Web3, you'll see the real sort of adoption and sort of the viral elements are in like the gaming industry or the metaverse industry. So we really spent a lot of time thinking about how can we abstract all the complexity that I was talking about with the data cat, the data decks, which is something that appeals to everyone. And that's what you're seeing on screen right there is what we call our NFMe ID. Now, how does it work, right? So think of this as the mirror version of you in the metaverse, right? And what do I mean by that? If you look at yourself in the real world, you know, you're putting out all of these valuable personal data. And the way we say it here is there's this concept of the PDCs. You see there, personal data categories. We kind of group your data into these categories, and we link it to an NFT that you would mint. So the NFT concept you see is on screen there. So you mint what's a base NFT, which is linked to some form of initial seed ID. So this might be something like a KYC or a proof of humanity. And then you actually collect data NFTs in those buckets and link it to your soulbound NFT. So what would happen is effectively you're having an NFT of NFTs, and the primary NFT represents you as a soulbound NFT.
Wow.
Soulbound meaning that you cannot sell this NFT because it's
you.
Together.
It's you. Yeah, it's a very exciting concept. Like we kind of designed this many months ago, and we started theorizing. And then around that time, Vitalik put out the concept of soulbound, right? How could we make it so that certain types of NFTs cannot be traded because it represents you, or it represents something that you did that shouldn't be transferred. So then we really got excited about this, and we started diving into this concept as well.
It looks exactly like the thing I was talking about back then. So you're actually gamifying the data collecting system, some sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. We're gamifying the whole concept. We're aligning to the one technique that we know always works, which is if you want to try something new, most likely try it in the gaming and the metaverse space, because people are willing to try it there. And we're exploring it in a very different way to a lot of the other data projects out there.
Yes, Praveen.
Yeah, I was saying sort of make it sexy, right? Like I think that was one thing that came out of a lot of our discussions with our initial VCs who contributed a lot to our project and got us to think differently, right? Like data is always boring, right? It's not something that, people are very interested about. Right. So that's what, made us sort of, really think out of the box, think about how we can make it, appeal more to everyone. Right. And obviously this was the result, right? Like we made it a sexy, cool thing to basically own data and claim data and, trade data. So that's behind this. And this is, I think, the key really, right? To make it virally adaptable. Amongst everyone is to make it something that someone would want, make it something appealing.
Okay, so like putting your mark on it, or identifying or getting, let's say, a piece of ID of yourself, but without your face on it. I think this is a very interesting case of you being able to have a persona in the metaverse, own that data, but through this KYC, it comes back to you. Will I be sharing with my data also my identity?
Yes, that's right. So the way you mint this is through a form of verifiable identity, right? Whether we're still playing around with some concepts, whether we go with a decentralized ID, whether we go with a verifiable credential, whether we go with a KYC or something decentralized like proof of humanity or something. The initial NFT that's minted is actually linked explicitly to this ID, this form of ID. And then you link other stuff to it, right? After that, because it's an NFT, it exists in your wallet, right? So it's basically yours. It's not Itheum's. Itheum's not doing anything here. We're providing the stack for you to interact and do this to minting, but it's in your wallet, right? And then you take it to other platforms, and you can then choose what you want to kind of expose out of it. And then the interesting part here is it starts to take on the properties of NFTs, right? You can do things like gated access to certain certain points. And the gated access might just mean that you have to reveal certain parts of your identity or certain buckets of those identity concepts that we were talking about. But ultimately, yes, Itheum is not going to be the centralized collector of the NFT avatars. We provide the stack for you to mint and link your data, but the data is yours. It's sitting in your wallet.
Talking about this, we need to go a little bit in the tokenomics and the specifics of the blockchain, because you said about you being able to take that NFT anywhere. And when we talk about anywhere, that means being a blockchain agnostic. We've seen a little bit of history of you and Itheum working with a whole lot of blockchains. I see, let's say, going into competitions, hackathons, and also getting grants from different, let's say, big projects. So I see you're deployed on testnets on Ethereum, on Polygon, on the BSC, the Binance Smart Chain, Platon, Harmony, and Parastate. Why Elrond? Why do you need Elrond for the launchpad now?
Yeah, so the journey began with Elrond. So if you look at our roadmap, right? Okay. So when we first built the data DEX proof of concept, this was about maybe 7 months ago, we really wanted to kind of introduce this to the world. So we took part in just one hackathon, which was the Moralis hackathon. And that was sponsored by Elrond, right? And Moralis was kind of growing at that time, and they will actually started doing Elrond integration, but they had a very robust Ethereum and Polygon integration. So we built the data decks and we demonstrated the bridging of personal data from Web 2 to Web 3, minting an NFT, and then trading it. And we were one of the winners of that hackathon, right? Now, since then, we always had the design philosophy that for a platform such as Itheum, right, which represents your personal data, we cannot just go and align to one chain and one dev environment and expect people to kind of flood in, right? So we then, if you read our white paper, we came up with the design of a multi-chain design, but a primary chain implementation and side chain implementation. And then we'll work on the cross-chain functionality. How could you potentially trade data as NFTs or other sort of elements between chains? But we had to pick our main chain, and this is what we were exploring. So the path we took was we took part in hackathons, not specifically to go and try and win every hackathon, like that would have been great, and we did win quite a few. But because of the support we got, right? I'll give you an example. We took part in the Hedera hackathon, and we just got support from them, and we kind of just escalated our dev time. So we were exploring different chains until we found the chain we actually found ideal for us, and that's Elrond. And then we got introduced to the Elrond team, and since then our focus is just getting the main chain implementation done.
Okay, so you're actually starting on the Elrond blockchain, but actually data as well as your project has to be on any chain. It doesn't matter where it flows, it just has to, right? That's
right. So the what we're building is an abstracted protocol for data exchange, right? So we're not specifically keeping the data on a chain or keeping the transactions on a chain. We're doing things, and I can jump into it, like proof of provenance and lineage and veracity. And this can happen on any chain, and we just need the chain to be able to communicate during the trade. So yes, you're right. We want to put the foundation in really strong with Elrond, demonstrate the scalability, the cost efficiencies that Elrond brings, and then at a later stage, we'll have a multi-chain implementation and then cross-chain communication.
But is it also the token, the Itheum token, going to be cross-chain, going to be flowing from chain to chain, or maybe it doesn't need to and it will stay only on the Elrond blockchain?
We're exploring exactly how that's going to work. The most easiest way to do is we bridge a supply of what we have into another chain, but the total supply is always the same. And then we enable cross-chain token bridging and burning as needed. But the specifics of how we're going to do that, it's still quite early. Our focus now is to get this working really well on the Elrond chain. And then we'll maybe introduce another EVM compatible chain. And then we'll start experimenting with all of this stuff.
Okay, that brings us actually into talking about the token and the crypto part of the project. We learned about the data and how it's gathered and how it's shared afterwards. Let's look a bit at the tokenomics. We have the launchpad going on, just finished yesterday on Meyer Launchpad, with the public sale sitting at 5% of the supply of 1 billion tokens. How did you think about the tokenomics, and is 5% too little actually for the decentralization part?
There was a huge interest in the project, and many people wanted in, and there were very, very few tickets to be won at the lottery, let's say, on the launchpad.
Yeah, so I'll take this because I look after some of the numbers, but basically. Yeah, so the 5% is pretty much similar to the previous project that launched, right, on the chain. So we followed a very similar proven model that actually the previous project launched, which is the Holoride project. So we adapted a lot of our tokenomics to match that, and we did originally have a smaller public allocation, but that it tremendously increased after a lot of input from Elrond, because they certainly believe that this is something that should have a very big impact on the public, right? So we did increase our public to where it is sitting right now. But then again, as per the previous project as well, 40% of the supply sits in ecosystem and community, right? So it is still a considerable amount that actually we do plan to, incentivize the community and the ecosystem to play a major role. So this is really where it is. It's going to roll in over time. And we do have an initial, a TG unlock, which is substantial in terms of what we're releasing over to the community. I mean, it's over 60% actually gets released to the community. So it's very community driven. And obviously for this to work, for data to be valuable, it has to come from the community, right? So that was the thinking behind this, and the long-term plan to actually have this in place to incentivize the community as much as possible.
Okay, let's break down a little bit those two parts, which I think are the most important, the community and the ecosystem parts. Do you have a roadmap for how it's going to be released over time?
So we do have the vesting, which is the same again as what actually we had with Holoride, right? So, but if you look at the community, you can look at the unlock. It's huge on day one, right? So basically, 60% of that is immediately released and it's available to the public, right? So that's actually more than what the Holoride project actually launched. And this was from input from the Elrond team. It said, hey, look, you're going to have a lot of interest from the public. Make sure you have more to offer. Right. And that's why we dipped right in and we said, yes, we totally understand that. And that's what resulted in the tokenomics change and this was the biggest change that was there from the previous project. Right. So we do plan to have a lot more campaigns around this where we will get the community involved. We've already planned campaigns now, which are just sitting for us to be launched. In addition to that, obviously, we got a big ecosystem bucket too. And this is to incentivize games, gaming guilds, other systems to interconnect with us, health data providers. In fact, we're actually speaking to one of a big Romanian healthcare provider. I can't name them yet because we're still working out the details, but we are sort of incentivizing them as well to be a part of this system where we can actually start getting some health-related data, because that's what we started doing. And certainly that's something that we're going to be looking at a lot more down the track. So this is what the whole ecosystem will sort of entail, right? Incentivizing others to be a part of the system, provide those off-ramps into the system so that data can be brought into the system, which can be then traded.
Okay, can we get a little bit more specific so people will understand better the community component? Because 62% of those 170 million tokens are going to be unlocked at the token generation event. What is the system behind unlocking those and giving them to the community?
Well, basically they unlock and they're available to trade, right? On the day that we actually list on the exchange, right? So which means essentially those who missed out on the lottery will have access to be, essentially the first ones that actually can actually purchase the tokens when it actually lists on the exchange, right? So that's essentially what it is. It's basically unlocking a lot more tokens to be available to the public that everyone can purchase, not just selected ones that actually went through the whole KYC and the process that actually was associated with the lottery system.
You're actually selling those tokens after the generation event because it's in the project's wallets.
Yeah, we're releasing them for sale, right? Essentially into the system.
How are you releasing them? Are they going to be inside of a pool or?
It's a pool, yes.
Yeah. That's right. So just to kind of clarify that, so in Elrond, the concept of meta bonding, so we're working on as a meta bonding incentive. So a lot of this actually going to be locked into a meta bonding program, which is really exciting, right? Because I don't know if you guys are familiar with that system, but that incentivizes long-term community alignment to a project. So I think a lot of that is going to go with that. Meta staking pools, but that's on the Elrond sort of incentivization, community incentivization model. Itheum has its own. So what the other things that we're launching, Praveen kind of pointed to that. It's around the gaming, what we call player passports, right? So this is the product that we are really kind of focusing on right now is how do we get players to own their data? And why am I mentioning this is we'll probably incentivize players to come into the ecosystem, link their data, and we would probably run data coalitions that buys data for them. So we're almost going to play the role of think of it as a data market maker and incentivizing data to come in, but at the same time, getting people to test our tech and then letting them own a lot of tokens. So it's a combination of Elrond's awesome community programs as well as things that we're working on.
Okay, that's cool. One more thing. Let's look a little bit about in the roadmap and how you're gonna play all this. So we're at the IDO on March of 2022. In the Q3 2022, we're gonna see the NFMe ID data avatars and metaverse deployed to testnet. And we're hoping, do you think that Q1 2023 is gonna be a good date for launching it on mainnet?
Yeah, so these are very high-level milestones. So I can tell you probably more accurate ones that are kind of based on this. So the first thing we're going to be launching, and we're already talking to the Elrond team on this, is going back to the product that differentiates us, right? So the NFMe ID avatars. These are NFTs, so they are kind of, they have layers to them. The base layer is what we call the origin layer, right? And this is, think of this as the first layer of minting that's going to happen. And then all the other data layers that happen over it are generative. So which means your data generates the other layers. So the first thing that we're working to get out there is, think of it as our first NFT drop. We're working out how to make it very fair to the community, not like this exclusive gated NFT drop, which is going to introduce the world to the base origin set of the NFT avatars. So that's the first thing that goes out. And once that's out, at the same time, what we're working on now is to demonstrate end-to-end our stack in the gaming ecosystem. And that's with the player passports, right? So that then aligns to the roadmap you see there. We will get the base NFT set out. Then we link the data, and then we do the generative minting of the accessories on the data NFT. And then that aligns to the roadmap you see after that.
We're going to see the roadmap play out as it's shown here. One more question about the economics of the project. So I've seen that 20% is going to the private sale, and then the public sale. How much money did you raise in total, and what's the runway for the project if, I don't know, things go bad? Like how much money do you have, and how much time does this money buy you?
Good question, and a very important question too, because I think that really is a very important thing that a lot of projects need to consider, right? So we've got obviously the 4 million that we raised from private, plus the 2 million that actually comes from public. A lot of what comes from public we actually are putting back, right? Essentially to incentivize the community to participate more. From as far as runway is concerned, we've actually worked out a 5-year runway with what we have. And that's only because both Mark and I have tremendous experience actually running businesses with hundreds of people, right? So we know how to manage the funds, we know how to be conservative, we know how to ensure that we have a good balance between spending too much and spending too little. So that's really the experience that we actually have to ensure that what we have, we can actually stretch it out for as long as possible. And it's not just that, right? We do have some revenue streams that we're actually planning to bring in. So we're not only going to be looking at the funds that we raise, but we're going to also be looking very seriously at how we're going to generate revenue to basically start supplementing what we actually have and extending the roadway beyond what it actually is right now. And that includes a lot of these off-ramps, right? Speaking to, third-party systems that can actually start pumping data in. And that's where I've got experience with engineering, manufacturing, which are all very data-intense industries, which actually can benefit a lot from data from other industries. And similarly from hospitality, again, it's, travel-related data is very valuable. And that too, especially now when the travel industry is sort of starting to, recover and is sort of moving forward, right? So those revenue streams essentially would come into, because basically we have a model where every trade within the system actually has a small percentage that we actually take, as part of actually generating some revenue for us to ensure that, we keep this going for as long as possible and in the best interest of everyone that's involved.
Yeah, you actually also answered the next question, which was the business model of this project and how it goes. Thank you for actually not even letting me ask that. Can we get a little bit of alpha from you guys? Do we have an approximate date for launching on the Mardex?
Well, we're still in talks. I mean, obviously that's not entirely our call. We're working very closely with the Aileron team. Obviously, they want to make sure the outcome of the DEX launch is actually the best outcome for everyone. So they're actually coming up with some newer tech that actually didn't exist in the previous launch to actually ensure that this launch is sort of handled slightly differently, again, to benefit the community, right? So they're going to take as long as they think they need. And it's with good reason. We're fully supportive of the fact that, hey, look, the launch has to be perfect. Take as much time as you need to ensure that it is the case, right? So we'll be looking at sometime in April for sure that it actually will be launched.
Okay.
But it's just a matter of when now, and we'll only do that once we're both in alignment that we will have the best possible outcome for the community.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that. Everybody expects a gigantic launch like Ride had maybe, but hopefully not one with troubles, and probably the team is working to resolve the bots and all this kind of stuff. How do you handle the pressure coming second to the Holoride project and the expectancy of the people probably thinking about this huge increase?
No, that's a great question. I think you guys can tell by the fact that it looks like we haven't slept in a few days, and that's true. Like we literally haven't slept in the last maybe a week. There's a lot of things that happen behind the scene, right? Firstly, the Elrond team is fantastic. We work with them very closely. We were in calls with them pretty much the whole of last night during the actual TGE. There is a lot of pressure from the community, given the first project was so hyped. It was a fantastic project and people loved it. And the Elrond community, as you guys know, they're so wonderful and into this sort of thing. Elrond warned us, the first conversation we had was, guys, it's going to be intense, right? So luckily, Praveen and I come from 20 years worth of tech experience in like really high intense industries. So we kind of broke it down into what needs to be done pragmatically. And like I said, a lot of things are not visible, but we work as much as we can working with Elrond to make sure it's the best community experience. Of course, there were issues with KYC that were brought up, but significantly a lot of those things we were working throughout the night to solve. So I think it's only going to continue this way, we feel, until the next listing. But at the end of the day, like Praveen was saying, Elrond has the community's interest at heart, and they're building tech and they are working with us to ensure that once this goes to the next stage, which is the listing, that we won't have those kind of issues we had previously. But it's challenging, as you would say.
We actually look forward to that happening, and we'll see how it goes. Anyway, the community, it's great around the Elrond ecosystem, and it's gonna be happy with whatever happens.
So automation is important. Decentralization is paramount, because what we've seen was let's say a very good initiative, turning not so good because of the bots. But everybody wanted, okay, we like decentralization, but we would like you to jump in. So and fix it for us. So now let's say we have a Romanian saying, is like Elrond is trying to blow into the yogurt, like trying to cool the yogurt even more to make sure no one is gonna get burnt with yogurt. That was a train, by the way. We have a train passing by once in a while.
It sounded like a train.
They're looking to make the yogurt into ice cream, you mean? Or?
Oh yeah, well, let's do some froyo.
I think we're good for today. I hope our viewers understood most of the most important stuff about the Itheum project. Maybe we can have another chat sometime in the future after we get some updates and developments on the project. We would like to thank you guys for attending our interview and showing yourself to the community. Probably there's going to be a lot of questions down there in the comments, so feel free to answer some people right in there. So thank you, Praveen. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, guys. It was really nice chatting. And yeah, we would love to come on board and chat with you guys more. And we're thinking of ways to bring more Elrond community in. Like as an example, our first product is around the gaming space, and we want more gaming companies to enter the Elrond ecosystem because that is a bit light at the moment. So if the community is keen to kind of work with us in the gaming data space, we're happy to talk to you.
So thank you, Paul brothers. Thank you for joining our show, let's say.
Yeah. Also, thank you for having us to change the industry that has some bad results in the past years. And no need to talk about that. Everybody knows. And I can't wait to use my NFMe. I just want to use that.
One more thing. You know about the one more thing in all Apple events. I need to put it out there. So how do you feel about the whole Web3 thing? Is it a fake, or is it actually a real thing that we can act upon? Because we've seen a lot of voices in the industry saying, well, yeah, I'd like to have Web3, but not controlled by some big tech companies. And we've seen a lot of interest of these guys coming in. We even had Vitalik coming in and saying, okay, everybody can join the metaverse, but we don't want anyone to control the hallways. They can get a room if they want to. how do you see Web3? Is there an opportunity, a real chance to have, let's say, a democratic Web3?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question to finish this off with. And the answer to that is yes, right? Like for me, what Web3 is ownership, provable ownership, which you could never have, 5 years ago. And what this does for something like data, for the first time, you could prove that you own it. You can prove that you gave it to somebody. You can trace that on the blockchain. I think we're just scratching the surface of this huge new sort of paradigm shift, right? And you're right. Like the only thing we got to do is make sure we don't try to take it overboard. Like we can't go from complete centralization to complete decentralization. We need to find a balance in between. We got to work on technologies like DAOs and governance, decentralized governance. But yeah, that's what kind of Itheum is trying to do as well. We're not going full decentralized data ownership because that's insane. Why would we do that? So we're working on how do we bring people along the journey with us from Web 2 enterprises as well as people like you and me, and just trying to focus our minds into like the same thing. So yeah, Web 3 is definitely a thing here to stay if we approach it correctly.
And also, okay. I'll add to that because both of us come from 20 years traditional tech, right? Why would we be getting into this right now if we didn't see a future? It'd be stupid to get into it, right? So that's in a fact that a lot of our generation, the older generation, now are sort of starting to understand the value of Web3 and how Web3 can sort of really benefit the end user, right? Rather than just organizations, right? And that's what it's all about when it comes to, I believe, certainly, because that was my thinking before, and my thinking now changed completely after I got into the whole Web3 aspect, right? And giving more back to the end user. And that's what it's all about. And that's what's going to be so strong about Web3, which both Mark and I are extremely excited about. So that's a great way to wrap this up, I suppose.
So were you one of those skeptics about crypto, Web3 and all kind of stuff? Were you?
Yeah, I was. I definitely was one of the skeptics, right? And I think only when I started getting into it and started understanding it, you have to invest the time, right? You have to invest the time to understand what it's all about. And it's not a simple thing, especially someone coming from a completely Web 2 real world background, getting into crypto is not easy, right? So you really got to invest the time and effort and understand what it's all about and understand what the heart is, and then that's really what it's all about in the end.
Thank you. Thank you for trying to change the world. Thank you, Paul brothers. And thank you, Itheum. Thank you.
Perfect.
Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I-ați văzut pe frații Paul, Praveen și Mark, doi frați de origine tamilă. Poate cu ocazia asta vă provoc să dați o căutare, să vedeți ce înseamnă tamil. E un popor care vorbește limba asta, sunt vreo 68 de milioane. M-am uitat repede așa. Doar 68 de milioane. Par puțini așa, dar nu știu câți vorbesc limba română pe planeta asta, s-ar putea să fie mai puțini, și care au un proiect foarte interesant care încearcă să schimbe lumea. Iată așadar că genul ăsta de proiecte care încep să vorbească despre date personale devin din ce în ce mai dese. Cred că e un trend care va continua.
Data este noul petrol, nu?
Tot auzim chestia asta de ceva vreme, hai să vedem cum o facem să se și întâmple.
Probabil nu-ți place că e vorba de petrol, dar...
Da. Nu-mi place petrolul.
Dar este una dintre cele mai folosite resurse, așa că e o metaforă bună.
Am putea să-i spunem că, da, uite, petrolul, că îl extragi de undeva, că este nu știu ce, dar...
Și că sunt doar câteva companii imense care profită.
Exact. Da, sunt prea multe similitudini. Dar cum ar fi să transformăm datele într-o nouă sursă de energie? Pentru că, până la urmă, suntem și ne definește ceea ce facem, acțiunile noastre. Și prin acțiunile noastre creăm aceste avataruri, da? Aceste persoane, aceste persona în acest metavers, în Web 3. Și atunci dacă tot ne petrecem atât de mult timp în spațiul digital, creăm, tranzacționăm, interacționăm, facem o grămadă de chestii în zona asta, aș prefera să știu că acea identitate a mea în spațiul virtual care mă reprezintă, că nu intru într-un rol când intru pe internet, deși unii se transformă, dar oricât de mult te transformăm până la urmă, este o mare parte din tine acolo, aș vrea să știu că acel ceva care este pe internet, acel NFT în cazul ăsta, este legat de mine, nu poate fi tranzacționat și mă reprezintă într-un mod în care eu aleg să o facă. Singura provocare pe care o mai văd eu este să nu ajungem ca în filmul ăla cu interviu cu diavolul, sau cum era? ăla cu, nu mai știu, deci era chestia aia când Brad Pitt cumpăra sufletul avocatului sau...
Sunăm pe Sorin.
Devil's Advocate, ăla? Avocatul diavolului?
I guess.
Oricum, ideea e că până la urmă, practic, ca să-ți vinzi sufletul, poate să-ți vinzi NFT-ul.
Și n-ai cum că e soulbound.
Și dacă e legat de sufletul tău, nu o să poți să-ți vinzi sufletul nici măcar dacă diavolul ar coborî pe pământ și a zice, vreau să-ți cumpăre NFT-ul din tine.
Okay.
Andrei, îți vreau NFT-ul din tine.
Ce final avem pentru interviul ăsta care, într-adevăr, sper că v-a plăcut, sper că ați înțeles mai multe despre proiectul Itheum și, în principal, cum se pronunță. Spuneți-ne mai jos la comentarii cum vi se pare proiectul, dați și un like, dați și un share și, ca de obicei, nu uitați că rubrica Criptochestionar este o rubrică sponsorizată de oamenii care vin la noi la interviu. Nu este nici pe departe un sfat financiar și nici măcar un ajutor. De fapt, este un ajutor în a vă face voi documentarea.
Dar atât.
Diferite proiecte. Chiar dacă sună foarte bine, chiar dacă ne place cum sună povestea din spatele multor proiecte, asta nu înseamnă că succesul este garantat.
Ne plac multe proiecte și foarte multe ajung aici în studio. Nu prea deținem la marea lor majoritate tokens, ne facem datoria să le prezentăm în fața voastră și să vă lăsăm pe voi să decideți pentru ele. Da? Decideți și votați cu banii voștri atunci când vreți să faceți astfel de investiții. Dar, din nou, luați aceste interviuri ca o mică parte din ceea ce aveți de făcut înainte să luați orice fel de decizie și nu vă bazați decizia doar pe ce vedeți aici. Și încă o dată, la final, insist, nu vă vindeți NFT-ul din voi!
Cool. Mulțumim!
Like, share și subscribe. Și până data viitoare să vă fie numai bine!